Good morning, Jackson staff and students. It is a magnificent Monday today as we follow our Tiger truths of be respectful, be responsible, and be safe. I would like to welcome Mr. Logan Shepard from Mrs. Vasquez's 5th grade class to say the Pledge of Allegiance. Good morning, how are you?
Good.
Let's place our right hand on our heart. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Excellent job. Thank you very much. Okay, boys and girls, today is a busy day at Jackson School. We are doing our Pbis Luncheon today. The first group are kindergarten and 2nd grade students at 11:15 to 11:45 in the lunchroom. So all of the other classrooms, you're eating in classrooms today. So everybody will be eating in their classroom. We have 2 groups, the March group and the April group. So kindergarten and 2nd grade at 11:15, the following students need to come to the lunchroom. Jake Vance in Mrs. Crandall's room, Valeria Pacheco in Mrs. Crandall's room, Aaliyah Kinsey in Mrs. Ransom's room, Piper Hume in Mrs. Ransom's room, Tyler Davis in Mrs. Shar's room, Caden Scoville in Mrs. Balch's room, Liliana Olegues from Mrs. Simon Moyle's room, Evan Brandis in Mrs. Sweeney's room, and Zayray Butler and Miss Peterson's classroom. Also from 11:15 to 11:45 are April winners, Abriel Macias in Mrs. Crandall's room, Jesus Martinez Garcia in Mrs. Crandall's room, Jordan Hammond in Mrs. Shar's room, and Dante Olegues in Mrs. Ransom's room. In Miss Peterson's room, Cecil Wright and Preston Strothman in Miss Peterson's room, Elijah Marino in Miss Simon Moyle's room, and Jessica Cruz in Mrs. Simon Moyle's room, and Kenny Clock in Mrs. Sweeney's room. All of you will come to the lunchroom at 11:15 to 11:45. Now, from 12 o'clock to 12:30, the following students will come to the lunchroom. Emma Strothman in Mrs. Menting's room, Miss Reister's room, Layla Gauger, Mrs. Masterson's room, Layla Rios in Miss Ernest's room, Cameron Milner in Mrs. Freeman's room, Jace Shemahorn in Mrs. Freeman's room, Angelita Romero in Mrs. Dunmore's room, Ethan Madison in Mrs. Jansen's room, Elijah Aguaniga in Mrs. Jansen's room, Jasmine Wright in Mrs. Gilligan's room, Jacob Stylen in Mrs. Gilligan's room, Destiny Carruthers in Mrs. Smith's room, Audrey Casillas in Mrs. Vasquez's room, Jose King in Mr. Reese's room, and Javion Wells in Mr. Reese's room. Also, from 12 to 12:30 in the lunchroom are April winners. Ileana Aranda Manzanilla in Mrs. Ernest's room, Bella Quinn in Mrs. Masterson's room, Nyla Edgren in Miss Reister's room, Danielle Cruz in Mrs. Dunmore's room, Cindy Solis in Mrs. Dunmore's room, Vanessa Crone in Mrs. Freeman's room, Carly Duncan in Mrs. Freeman's room, Riley Sean Kelly in Mrs. Jansen's room, Brandon Valdivia Orozco in Mrs. Gilligan's room, Joss Silva Okana in Mrs. Gilligan's room, Lily Stylen in Miss Smith's room, Evo Oswald in Miss Smith's room, Madeline Rosberg in Mr. Reese's room, and Heidi Bonchas in Mrs. Vasquez's room. All of the students that I just named will come from 12 to 12:30 into the lunchroom. All of the other grade level students, we will eat in our classrooms today while we do the Pbis luncheons. I think we have over 50 children coming for lunch today, so it will be very, very busy. I also want to say that tomorrow night, boys and girls, and I'm sure you've received information on this, that tomorrow night is the Pta Carnival here at Jackson School from 5 o'clock at night until 7 o'clock. So we look forward to having you here at the Pta Carnival, which will be wonderful. I cannot wait. So let's make it a magnificent Monday today, and don't forget to be awesome.